Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Hope everyone is having a great day and a happy Labor Day weekend. It's currently Saturday. I'm heading to Virginia right now. I got a 4-hour trip to Virginia to visit some friends, and I figured that while I'm heading there, I'm gonna make a quick video. I'm gonna do a top 5 things I like about my Z06 Corvette. I'm just gonna talk about some of the things that I'm liking the most. In the first almost now month of ownership of this car, I put about 1,000 miles on it, city and highway. So from that experience, I put together like a really small list of 5 things that I like about this car the most. I was thinking of doing also maybe on the way back top 5 things I don't like, but I haven't found 5 things I don't like yet. But anyway, let's get this list started with number 1, and that is the heads-up display. So I've never had a chance before to drive a car with a heads-up display, especially a manual car with the heads-up display. And the reason why I like it, I think the most, is you tend to spend a lot of time in traffic when you're living in New York City. And a lot of that traffic, excuse me, and a lot of that traffic tends to roll anywhere between 3 to 7 miles an hour usually. Now the problem with a Corvette at those speeds is you can't really fully release the clutch, or you know, let me put it another way. Once you're off the clutch in first gear, the car is rolling at about 5 miles an hour. So if the traffic slows down to less than 5 miles an hour, I have to, you know, press the clutch in and just roll or go into neutral. And with my previous car, with the C5, I always had to sort of listen. Ooh, that's not good. How did that guy end up sideways in the middle of the street like that? Alright, anyway, the thing was, with the C5 for example, was I had to listen and look at the speedo. And the thing was that I always had to look at the speedo to see if, you know, if I'm approaching 5 miles an hour or less. I always had to look down and look up where I'm going. Look down, look up where I'm going. Whereas, you know, it wasn't much of an issue once I got the exhaust, because I could just hear like the engine once the RPM started getting low. But with this, with the heads-up display, I never have to look down. I see that I'm going 5 or 6 miles an hour, or I see where I'm gonna slow down below 5 miles an hour, so I never really have to take my eyes off the road. I can just look at a heads-up display. And I also like all the the different ways you could set up the heads-up display. So I don't know if you could see it on camera, but you got street mode, which just shows normally the speed. You got track mode 1, which shows the speed, like an RPM gauge. You can switch between oil temp, coolant temp, and oil pressure, which is the bar on the right. You got your G meter. And track mode 2, which is my favorite, which is the same as track mode 1, except track mode 2 has the RPM gauge like in a C7 Corvette, going from side to side instead of like a normal gauge. I haven't had an opportunity yet to test it out at the track, but you know, I'm curious to see how it works on a track when you have the speed and the RPM and everything right in front of you. But I think the best part will be not even being able to see the speed right ahead of you, right in front of you, or the RPM, but you'll be able to see your oil temp, your coolant temp, your oil pressure on that. That is more important, being able to see it right in front of you, than the speed or RPM, because the speed, you know, when you're going to turns on a racetrack, it's more just by feel. You get a feel for it, for at what mark you start braking and at what point you stop braking, at what speed you turn in. It's more of a feel. You never really look down at your gauges to see how fast you're going. So I don't think seeing the speed will make that much of a difference, but seeing your oil temperature and oil pressure on a racetrack, you know, that's a big plus, because you know, you could spot in that heads-up display that, for example, you have really high oil temps or your oil pressure is getting low. You can spot that on the heads-up display and pull in before something happens to the engine. So you can spot like a problem before it actually, like, you know, blows up your engine or something like that. So I think the heads-up display is one of the things that I like the most about this car. Okay, so the second thing I like about this car the most, which I wasn't expecting it to be this good, is, I guess it'll be a combination, is the clutch. So the clutch in this car is super light. Like, I put some pressure on it with my foot and it like almost collapses under my foot. Like, it is so light. I can reach under to the I can reach under with my hand to the pedals, and I can push in the clutch almost with 2 fingers, with these 2 fingers. So I'm able to push it down with 3. I'm almost able to push it down with 2. So the clutch is super light in this car, and I love that about it. Like, being stuck in traffic or something, my foot doesn't get tired at all. Like, this clutch is so light. You know, the way the clutch grabs and the way this car sets off, like, this car sets off without using gas at all. You don't have to touch, you don't have to go anywhere near the gas to get the car moving with using just the clutch. Even if you're like on a slide uphill, it's very easy to set off with this car, as the clutch is like so easy to use as well. Not that it's just light, but the engagement points on this clutch are so are super easy. This car, I think this is the easiest clutch I've ever driven. Like, it's the easiest, it's the lightest, it's the most forgiving. There is not a bad thing I can say about this clutch. There really isn't. Like, you know, what surprised me is that a clutch in a 500 horsepower 7-liter car is lighter than the clutch was in my C5 Corvette, than my stock clutch. Because I also had an XD in it, and with the TIC Clutchmaster, it became pretty damn heavy. But before that, before the TIC Clutchmaster, when I had just a stock clutch and stock Clutchmaster, 100% stock, it was heavier than this. This is lighter. This grabs better. Well, grabs better, not in the sense that it grabs harder. It's just that it's more flexible. You have more flexibility, like with the with the engagement point when you're setting off and things like that. So this clutch is very forgiving, and it's very easy to be smooth with this car, with this clutch. Like, you know, changing gears or downshifting, heel and toe, or whatever you want to do. It's all super easy to be very smooth with this car, and I really like that about its clutch. And if it ever goes bad, I already told myself, if it ever goes bad, you know, from racetracks or something, it's time to replace it. I'm just gonna get another LS7 clutch. I'm not doing anything aftermarket, anything crazy. Like, I love this clutch. This clutch is amazing for daily driving, and it's a stock OEM clutch, so it can handle the power, no problem. So I don't expect to have any problems with it anytime soon, and it's just a really good clutch. The third thing that I like most about this car, which I will say is also a huge difference over the C5, which I wasn't expecting it to be as good, is the shifter. The C6 shifter in this car is night and day difference compared to like the C5, or even like, for example, a 350Z I drove on track once a long time ago. You know, to a lot of the manual cars, this feels amazing. It's super light. It is much lighter, much lighter than any shifter I had in the C5 Corvette. The throws are just a little bit longer than a short shifter, but at the same time, it's still just as precise. Like, I am not worried that I'm gonna miss a gear when I'm shifting this car quickly. Biggest problem, for example, like with the C5, was the 5th and 6th gears were super notchy to get into, always. With this, like, it's super easy. Like, it's a no-brainer. I don't have to use any like actually muscle. It's just the shifter almost like moves by itself. Like, it's a really good shifter. I don't have any of that like feeling where, oh my god, it's a stick shift it's a stick shift in traffic, it must be terrible, oh it sucks, I hate it, blah blah blah. I don't. Like, this and an automatic will not make much of a difference to me, honestly. This shifter paired with that clutch, it's such an easy car to drive in traffic, on the highway, going through the gears. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. One of the first things I was thinking of doing before I even got the car, because I never test drove a C6 before. I bought this car like sight unseen. Like I called up the dealership. I asked them, do you still have it? They said yes. I'm putting a deposit down. I'm buying that car. Like that's pretty much how it went. That's pretty much how it went. And so one of the first things I was thinking of doing, like as soon as I get it, was a short shifter, like an MGW that I had in a C5. The MGW in a C5, you know, dramatically changed how that car felt. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm keeping the stock C6 shifter. It's just absolutely amazing. So also, if you're wondering what it's like to drive this car, like, you know, for every day, you know, combine this clutch with this awesome shifter, you could have never driven stick before, and this car is going to be super easy for you, honestly. So that's the third thing that I like the most, is this shifter. It's awesome. Okay, now the fourth thing that I like the most about this car, which this part was the most surprising part about this whole car, and that is the comfort of this car. So I was expecting this, you know, like a Z06 made for the racetrack, pretty much. I thought it was going to be a lot stiffer than the C5 was, but honestly, it's more comfortable. This car is actually surprisingly comfortable for you know, for a Corvette, and like even compared to like compared to a normal car, like a normal sedan, I can't really compare it to, like, you know, you can't compare the comfort to like an SUV or a truck, but comparing to like a normal mid-size or full-size sedan, this thing is almost as comfortable as that. The only like difference is that this has like the original Goodyear Eagle F1 run flat tires. So those tires are like in themselves super hard, because the run flats, the sidewalls are super stiff, so the tire doesn't actually soak up any of the bumps. Everything goes to the wheel and to the suspension and then to you. So, you know, even with the tires not like absorbing any of the impact, this car feels super comfortable actually. Like I'm genuinely surprised. That's what surprised me the most when I was driving this car when I first drove it. I'm just driving over some of the areas where I drove my C5, and I'm just like, holy crap, this thing is unbelievably comfortable. Like, it's not rattling me around or anything. Like, this car is actually comfortable. And people say that once you change out those run flat tires for like some good Michelins or something, it makes it even more comfortable, because the sidewalls are not as stiff anymore, so the tires actually start absorbing some of the impact as well. But even that aside, you know, just the suspension, pretty much, since the tires are not doing anything, just the suspension, this car is absolutely amazing for daily street driving. And mine doesn't even have the magnetic shocks. Mine just has normal Z06 shocks. It does not have the Z07 package, so I don't have the magnetic shocks. And even like without the magnetic shocks, like just the normal shocks, this car is like so comfortable. It's just crazy. Like, I wasn't expecting it to be this comfortable. I was expecting it to be worse. And also, you know, that compared with the fact that it's a 2013 car, so the interior is, you know, much better quality. There's no rattling or anything going over bumps. Like, you could live with this car. For daily driving, you could actually live with this car. Even, I get it why, like, I see some of these older guys now, like, or like, you know, 65, 70, 80-year-olds driving these cars, and like, you know, I would understand a normal like base C6 or C7 Corvette or C5, whatever, but I see them in like Z06 or even Z01 Corvettes all this time, and I'm like, why would you want that when you're like 70 or 80 years old? You know, don't you want like a nice, comfortable car? Well, now that I'm in one, I realize this is a nice and comfortable car. So whether you're like, you know, whether you're 18 years old and and you know, you got like money to blow on a Z06, or you're 70 years old, this car will be very comfortable for you. This car will be very comfortable for you, and for daily driving, I wouldn't change a thing about the suspension setup. It's just absolutely amazing. And the last thing from the top 5 things that I like the most is, you know, of course, you already knew that this was gonna be like the #1 thing on my list. Well, not like the first thing, but this is the thing that I like the most. Is of course what's under the hood, and that is the LS7, the 7-liter naturally aspirated V8, which is why everybody loves the C6 Z06 Corvette, why a lot of people prefer it over any C7 and even over the C6 ZR1. It's simply because of this engine. So there's no other way of putting it, pretty much. This Z06, the LS7 that is sitting under the hood, it's just an absolute monster. You know, you're getting 500 horsepower from a naturally aspirated 7-liter. That's like going back to the 70s. That's like going back to the 70s in the 21st century. Like all those old school American muscle cars that had the 440 big blocks and that had like the 440 engines and like put out 400 horsepower and like 500 foot-pounds of torque, naturally aspirated. This is like a modern version of that. This is like a modern version of that. There's nobody else that did anything like this. You could say that the Viper is similar, but then the Viper is a V10, it's not a V8, and the Viper wasn't produced until the 90s. But you know, the Corvette was, and Z06 C6 in a way is like, you know, going back in time to the 70s and just, you know, driving an old school muscle car, except you know, you actually got handling. So not only does the LS7, you know, have 7 liters, like pretty much anybody that's probably watching this video knows, you know, the best part about it, the main reason, not even that it's a 7-liter, not that it's 500 horsepower, none of those things. The main reason why people love these motors is that it's all of that, and it goes to 7,000 RPM. Like no V8 that I know of with this capacity, with this capacity of this size, goes to 7,000 RPM. None. Unless they're like heavily modified with aftermarket parts, they don't. They all go to 6, 6.2 maybe. But like this thing just absolutely screams at 7,000 RPM, even with a stock exhaust. All it has done is the fuse was pulled out for the exhaust valves, so they're always open. Rather than opening up above like 3,000 RPM, they're open all the time. And just with that, this car, you know, this motor is super loud. I even got a little wheel spin in third just then. like you cannot go near the gas with this car. Like you just can't. It's spinning like crazy. But you know what? I'm gonna set the GoPro down. You know, before I talk more about this engine, I'm gonna set the GoPro down. I'm gonna try to get out of the city where it's more of an open road, and you know, maybe do some pulls there, and we'll continue talking about the engine then.
Continue straight for 35 minutes. New Jersey Turnpike, front, south.
Yeah, that's why people love these engines. Spinning in second, spinning in third. Like every time I hit the gas, it just puts a huge smile on my face and gets my heart beating like crazy. Like I've been in some fast cars before. I've been in some fast cars before. Like I've been in a GT3. I've been in a 458. I've been in a GTR. I've been in a Huracan. None of those cars compared to this. And probably because it's a stick. All those cars are like dual clutch, whereas this car, it's a stick. So every gear change jerks you, puts you back into your seat. This is a much more raw car, but this motor, it just not only 500 horsepower, but 500 foot-pounds of torque. So I gotta say, out of all the cars that I know of all the cars I've heard in my entire life, of all the different exhaust setups and videos I watched on YouTube, the LS7 is the best sounding engine in the entire world to me. There's no better sounding engine. Especially if you get an exhaust on, and if you add a cam to it, there is nothing better. There is no better engine in the world to me, no better sounding engine than a cammed LS7 with long tube headers. There's nothing better. Like, I don't really have to talk about this engine. This engine will just speak for itself. If I'm in 6th gear right now, and 6th gear in these cars is very, very, very long. Going 75 at like 1600 RPM, and I hit the gas. That's 80. That's 85. Like, this engine is just an absolute torque monster as well down low. It'll pull all the way from idle to 7,000 RPM. Doesn't matter what gear you're in. It'll pull from like 1,000 to 7,000 easy. So like, even if I go down to 5th, for example, and I'm going like around 75 miles an hour right now, and I just hit the gas in 5th, that's 80. That's 85. Like, you don't have to change gears in this car pretty much. You can just drive it in one gear the entire time. And it'll go all the way to the end of that speedo. It'll go all the way to 200. But just the way it delivers power with like just like such a big naturally aspirated V8, the throttle response, everything about this car feels instant, like that. Like, there's no delay. It's got torque down low, it's got massive power up top, so there's no delay, it's instant power, and it doesn't matter what gear, what RPM, and what speed you're going. Like, this LS7 is an absolute monster, and it doesn't matter.
Watch out, vehicle on shoulder ahead.
Like, this LS7 is an absolute monster of an engine. So I think, you know, one thing is, you know, there's a downside to everything. Like, nothing is perfect. So there is, you know, for all the like pros and positive things about this engine, it had to come with one massive con, one massive negative thing about it, and that is that it tends to, how should I say it, explode sometimes. So the thing about these LS7s is, you know, they're amazing engines, but they tend to occasionally, not too often, drop a valve into the block, and then it tells you one last big knock joke before it goes boom. According to GM, there was a machining error at one of the heads suppliers for them at the time, and they machined the valve guides for the intake and exhaust valves very slightly off spec, I guess you could say. And so what happens is they tend to wear out prematurely, and eventually what happens is the valve falls off that valve guide because it just develops like loose play until eventually the valve just falls off of it and into the block. And if that happens, you're looking at a new engine. You know, the one downside about the LS7, and it's a pretty damn big one, but you know, honestly, but there is a fix for it. You could just, you know, get a better, stronger aftermarket valve guides. You pull the heads, you get it done, get it over with, and then, you know, this becomes completely bulletproof pretty much. Also, some of the 2012 and 2013 LS7s had issues with rod bearings. They changed the coating on which they used on the rod bearings to like the titanium or something like that, and it turns out that in a lot of them, that coating wore off prematurely, causing a drop in oil pressure and eventually rod bearing failure. But according to like all the things that I read in the forums and what people told me, if the rod bearings were bad in a 2012 or 2013 LS7, that would happen within the first couple thousand of miles of the car, from like anywhere from like 1,000 to 5,000-6,000 maybe. If you go past that point and your oil pressure is still perfect and everything is fine, then it's safe to say that those rod bearings are fine and they're going to be good for a long time. But there were a lot of people who had rod bearing failures because of that premature coating wear on the rod bearings. But you know, mine is a 2013. It's got now about 19,000 miles on it. Oil pressure is still perfect, you know, it's still running fine. So my rod bearings are fine, so therefore I don't have to worry about that. But the valves and the valve guides and dropping a valve into the block, that's a problem for all LS7 years. So that's something I'm gonna want to get fixed in the future. There's some people that go like, you know, 150, 200,000 miles on their stock LS7s and they don't have an issue with the valves. But I, for one, just to be safe, want to get it done, so I will be getting it done soon, eventually. But you know, other than the valve guides, you cannot say a bad thing about this LS7. You really cannot. So yeah, I think I'm gonna end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe for more videos. I'll be making more videos with this car, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.
Keep the shit going till the day that I'm dead. Hey, run around and get somewhere there's nowhere to find. I got a feeling that I'm losing every piece of my mind. This might sound crazy and I don't know why, but I'm enjoying every